Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Michigan on the road playing USC. And this is, at least to me, one of the more fascinating games that we're going to get all Saturday because both of these football teams are on the cusp of getting into that college football playoff conversation. In the winner of this football game, I think, asserts themselves as a team that's got a really good chance to make a run at the college football playoffs. Now, we already did our preview and prediction episode. We're going to dive into this one a little bit more. The best way to do it, good old fashioned roster battle. I think a lot of the Michigan and USC fans who've been rocking with the boys the last couple of years know what's coming. We're going to go position group by position group, evaluate these two rosters and say, hey, who's got more talent on the football field come Saturday night? But more importantly than that, where are the talent advantages? Because to me, that's the storyline of this football game. How is this game going to be played? If you're Lincoln Riley and USC, boasting the number one offense in the country heading in this matchup, the frame of mind that I think Lincoln Riley's in is, hey, we want as many possessions as possible and just dare Michigan to try to keep up going blow for blow, scoring touchdowns. And if you're Michigan, you kind of want this game to look like it did a year ago, where you're running the football, controlling the time of possession, and playing your brand of football. Whatever team plays their brand and kind of leans into their advantages, probably going to be the winner in this one. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, Michigan fans, USC fans, hey, please let it fly in the comments section. These are two fan bases that have shown a ton of love to the boys the last couple of years. I'm fired up for this one. I know many of y'all are as well. Let it fly in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, let's start at the top here. Quarterback position. And we got to start with Jaden at USC. Quietly has been one of the best quarterbacks in the country to start 2025. I mean, just look at the numbers: a 70% completion percentage, 1,500 passing yards, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. The storyline for Jaden is, I don't think we're all that surprised to see this kid making some high-level game-changing throws. We know he's a really talented quarterback. The problem with Jaden last year was he's putting the ball in harm's way a lot. And there were a lot of head-scratching turnovers. He has seemingly eliminated that from his game. And I think one of the big question marks going up against the Wink Martindale defense, this is the best defense that USC will have seen this point up until this point in 2025, is can we continue to make those high level throws and avoid turning the football over and putting the ball in harm's way? This is the one big difference between Jaden this year and what we saw with Miller Moss last year in this game. Jaden's ability to make it work when it's not perfect. It was no secret last year that, Michigan tore up that USC offensive line. There was a lot of pressure in Miller Moss's face. And Miller Moss just not a great athlete, not great getting outside the pocket, throwing off platform, and being creative at the quarterback position. When you want to beat a team like Michigan that has a really damn good defense, you have to have a quarterback that can elevate and make it work when it's not pretty. I'm looking at Jaden and say, hey, 5.1% pressure to sack ratio, meaning on only 5% of the pressures that Jaden sees is he taking sacks. That tells us that, hey, he's doing a really good job getting himself out of trouble, getting out of the pocket, and making sure he's not taking those negative plays, which is something that Miller Moss just flat out couldn't do last year. If I'm a USC fan, I feel a little bit more confident in Jaden's ability to have success against a Michigan defense that is going to be really damn aggressive. Flipping the sides here, Bryce Underwood. Look, I think he's quite frankly underappreciated in terms of what he's done. I think there are a lot of people that have not watched Michigan play a lot. Maybe, maybe they watched that Oklahoma game a couple of weeks ago and just assume that Bryce Underwood hasn't been very good to start the year. Because you look at the numbers: 59% completion percentage, 1,000 passing yards, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. Those aren't numbers that are jumping out at you. I'm looking at the adjusted completion percentage, 73.5%. What's the story here? Michigan's wide receivers struggling with drop passes. Bryce Underwood's been a lot better than a lot of people, I think, give him credit for. I think what's been around Bryce Underwood probably hasn't been good enough. Now, when he's saying, "Hey, what quarterback do you want to take in this game?" I think the answer is Jaden, pretty clearly. I think Bryce Underwood's a lot better of a quarterback than a lot of people are giving him credit right now. Running back position. This is one where I'm gonna take heat with whatever running back room I go with. Now let's start with Wayman Jordan at USC. Again, one of the more underappreciated players that we see in the Big Ten, because you're looking at his numbers: 537 rushing yards, 7 yards per carry, 5.5 yards per carry after contact. Wayman Jordan and his elusivity is elite. And you talk about a really fun matchup here. I think USC is going to try to run the football a little bit more than they did last year. I mean, the best way to try to keep a Michigan pass rush at bay is, hey, we going to lean into the ground game a little bit more. And they've had a lot of success doing it. Wayman Jordan against these Michigan linebackers who've been really good tackling in space. That's a matchup you're looking at. But make no mistake about it, Wayman Jordan, really, really good running back, and they've gotten a lot of value from Eli Sanders too. And then you look at Michigan. Justice Haynes, 654 yards, 7.7 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns, 20 missed tackles forced on the year, 4.2 yards per carry after contact. The biggest value that Justice Haynes has brought to Michigan is the ability to be explosive. Michigan didn't really have that last year with Kaleb Mullings. Kaleb Mullings was a freaking battering ram, but when it got to the second level, when it said, "Hey, you can turn a 10-yard carry into a 50-yard carry and take it to the house," Kaleb Mullings did not have that top end gear. Justice Haynes does. What running back room am I taking? And the USC fans are going to be hot with me in the comment section. I get it because y'all know how I feel about Wayman Jordan. I'm going to take Justice Haynes for two different reasons. One, his home run hitting ability, but number two, he's holding on to the football. That's been a little bit of a problem for Wayman Jordan. And this is a game where you can't afford to have those turnovers and those mistakes. I'm going to go with this Michigan running back room. You best believe that it's really damn close. Wide receiver position. This is the biggest advantage that USC has. Mekhi Lemon, you could make the argument that Mekhi Lemon is the best wide receiver in the country. And we're kind of working on the assumption that Jacoby Lane's going to be back too. You got two top 5 receivers in the country on USC, at least in my take, with Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. The biggest issue for Michigan is, can you match that kind of firepower? I'm not really sure. And it's going to be a really big storyline because where's USC hurting the most? Probably in that secondary. I think a lot of USC fans that follow this team closely know this secondary is banged up and, quite frankly, just hasn't been all that good. Can Michigan's wide receivers capitalize? If there is one reason to be optimistic, is probably the best way I'd put it, is against Wisconsin, you kind of saw some wide receivers step up. Donovan McCulley most notably has been that guy that's teetering on that wide receiver one vibe. I think Donovan McCulley really showed everybody he's the wide receiver one in this offense. The other story is Andrew Marsh. And I mean, many USC fans who followed this sport closely remember Andrew Marsh because USC was going after him hard when he was coming out of high school. Andrew Marsh showing that he maybe can be that wide receiver too for Michigan. I think Michigan likes the tight ends, and I think Michigan might try to utilize the tight ends a little bit in this game. But I think it's pretty dang clear when you talk about who has the more dynamic pass catching room, you probably have to lean. No, not probably. You lean with USC. Offensive line. This is a very interesting conversation because let's just look at the numbers first. USC, this offense is averaging 6.4 yards per carry, which is top 5 in the country. They're only allowing a sack on 1.9% of dropbacks. That is top 10 in the country. This offensive line on paper with the numbers has actually looked pretty dang good. Now, the storyline here is, number one, what's the health of Elijah Page at left tackle? Sounds like he's going to be back. That's a massive storyline. Number two is you don't have your starting center and Killian O'Connor. John Ray Reed came in. I thought John Ray Reed was a damn good football player at Syracuse. He struggled and very clearly is not the same value that Killian O'Connor is at center. My biggest question for USC is, look, this offensive line has graded out pretty dang well. It has not seen a very elite defensive front yet on the season. Like, I don't know if I love Michigan State. I don't know if I love Illinois. I think Michigan has a significantly better defensive line than what we've seen Michigan State have and Illinois have. And so, what does this USC offensive line look like when they're going up against a really high quality defensive line? That storyline number one. Then I look towards Michigan's offensive line. I think it's been pretty dang good. You're running the football very well. 6.6 yards per carry. That's top 3 in the country. Only giving up a sack on 3.6% of offensive or of dropbacks, I should say. That's 32nd in the country. And you feel like Michigan's a little bit more battle tested. Look, the numbers when you're evaluating the offensive lines, it might favor USC a little bit, but USC hasn't taken a road trip to Oklahoma. USC hasn't played Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not a very good team, but they have a pretty solid defensive line. I'm going to lean Michigan on the offensive line, even though I will say this, USC's offensive line has been much better than what I expected. I just don't know what it looks like against an elite defensive front, of which I think Michigan does have. And the injuries a little bit concern me. Elijah Page coming back from injury, John Ray Reed taking over at the center position. With some of those question marks, I'm going to lean Michigan in this one. It's a really big storyline, though, because if USC can hold up, if USC can keep Jaden protected, and a USC can run the football in this one, all of a sudden you start feeling better about USC's chances to win this game. Defensive line. This is the other big storyline that I have, right? Because you look at Michigan's defensive line, been really dang good. Only allowing 3.5 yards per carry. That's top 30 in the country. Sacking the quarterback. Well, I gave you the wrong numbers. Excuse me. Only allowing 2.5 yards per carry, which is number 6 in the country. So elite against the run. Sacking the quarterback 8.5% of the time. That's 21st in the country. This USC defensive line, this is a massive conversation, specifically USC stopping the run. Because guess what USC has that they didn't have last year? They have a very, very dynamic pass rush unit. I'm talking about Anthony Lucas. I'm talking about Cam Crawford. I'm talking about G-Day on the inside and Braylon Shelby. They got NFL guys, especially with what they can do getting after the passer. My biggest question, and I think the biggest question for a lot of USC fans, is when we saw this USC defensive line play Illinois, they were getting moved. And Illinois was able to run the football. And when you're able to run the football, it's hard to get to your pass rush sets. And Illinois, kind of avoided that bite that USC has rushing the passer. Can USC stop the run against Michigan? Get Michigan into some of those second and third and long situations, allowing some of your best players to get after the passer. That's probably the biggest storyline in this game. And the frustrating part about USC is that, you brought in Keyshawn Silver. You brought in Jai Air, 2 guys that go 340 plus to stop the run. Be those that dirty work 2 gappers that can be really present against the run. They have not been those kind of players for USC to start 2025. You need those kind of guys to show it. Michigan, you know what Michigan's going to try to go on the road and do. A lot of decent amount of inside zone, a lot of power stuff, and say, hey, we're going to move you off the line of scrimmage and try to run the football. And if USC cannot hold up in the way that they didn't hold up against Illinois, it's hard to see USC win this football game. What does USC do stopping the run? How often can they get into those second and third and long situations where they can really allow their pass rushers to pin their ears back and get after the passer? That's the storyline. And then Michigan, the most unique storyline here is Jayshawn Barham, who's an off-ball linebacker for Michigan, kicking down and playing edge. Very similar to the transition that we saw Abdullah Carter make for Penn State. Now, I'm not saying Jayshawn Barham is Abdullah Carter, but I also am not saying the impact that he's having on the football game coming off the edge, it's pretty damn close. It's been a really good transition for Michigan that has kind of revolutionized how Michigan's playing defense. Can these tackles deal with Derek Moore and Jayshon Barham? You've seen good things from Justin T, but at the same time, he's a redshirt freshman and struggled a little bit against Illinois, which was probably the best defensive front they've seen. Can Michigan attack that? Can Michigan win up front? I'm going to take Michigan's defensive line because of what I saw from USC's defensive line against Illinois and the lack of ability they had to stop the run. Linebacker position, another very, very interesting conversation. Let's get this out of the way first. The best linebacker on the field is Eric Gentry. And I think maybe Michigan fans will get mad at me for saying that. You got to go watch Eric Gentry. He's one of the more slept on defensive players that we see in this conference and quite frankly in the country. There's really not many off-ball linebackers that have a higher influence on a football game than Eric Gentry. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, really good coming off the edge, really dynamic dropping back in coverage because of how long he is. I think he's actually 6'6", not 6'5". Really dynamic linebacker. My question is, do we trust the other linebackers in this room, Desmond Stevens, or a guy like Jaden Walker? Because I look at Michigan and say it's been so solid. Ernest Hausman, Cole Sullivan, Jimmy Rolder. I don't think Michigan has a guy that has the impact that Eric Gentry does, although Cole Sullivan is slowly making that argument. But I do think Michigan has more linebackers that you trust at a high level. And here's the thing with Michigan's linebackers that I really do appreciate is they're all really consistent. Cole Sullivan only misses 10% of his tackles. Jimmy Rolder only misses 6.5%. Ernest Hausman only misses 8.8%. But what you've seen from Michigan that you did not see last year, and I think a large part of this is thanks to Cole Sullivan, you're seeing these linebackers have a bigger impact on games, creating tackles for loss, creating sacks on the quarterback, something that Michigan had good linebackers last year with Ernest and Jayshon. The impact on the game wasn't as obvious. I'm going to take Michigan's linebacker room as a whole, but also recognizing that Eric Gentry is probably the best linebacker on the field. And then in the secondary, I think this one's pretty dang obvious. Michigan's secondary is better than USC's. The conversation is, can this Michigan secondary deal with those USC wide receivers? And a USC secondary that is struggling, can they deal with those Michigan wide receivers that still have a lot to prove? Really big storyline in this one, too. It's matchups, right? Like USC has some really elite aspects about this football team. I think Michigan has some really good aspects about this football team as well. What team can lean into the matchup advantages that they have, and what team wins those crucial matchups? Hey, those USC wide receivers against a very, very solid Michigan secondary, who wins that matchup? That USC offensive line that is actually graded out pretty damn well against an elite defensive line, of which they haven't really seen before. Who wins that matchup? That's gonna be who wins this football game. Very, very excited. I leaned Michigan in this one because I do think that Michigan's advantages along the lines of scrimmage will allow them to play the game the way they want it to be played and not USC. But if USC rebounds on the defensive line, if USC can hold up on their offensive line better than they did last year, you make no mistake about it. USC has the chance to win every single football game they play because their offense can just put up so many points on the board. And if it gets into that shootout kind of game where USC puts up 40, the question is, can Michigan match it? We'll see. Very, very fun game. Extremely excited about it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Please let it fly in the comment section, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.